We don't have a political culture in this country.
Let me give you another value that I think you'll have because you're exhibiting it now, which is that, and it comes through in the podcast a lot, and it comes through in your book. And what comes through all of those things is, I think, still a real passion for politics and for its capacity for change.
Yeah.
And that not everybody believes that anymore. I mean, that's in a way an unfashionable case to make, isn't it?
Yeah, and also that's why, you know, that lady has come along carrying Rory Stewart book, not mine. All I'd say, if I can differentiate between them, is that his book, I think, is a very negative message about politics. And I understand why people have a negative view of politics. I completely understand it. But what I like to say is I've got a very negative view of what's happened in recent years, particularly since the referendum. Very negative view of Trump, very negative view of Bolsonaro, of Orban, of Modi, of all the sort of populism that's gone around the world. But my worry is that people use it as an excuse to turn away from politics. But if we are serious about protecting democracy, we're going to have to turn into politics. And the reason why I wrote the book was to go into schools, and that's what I'm doing now, and say to kids, listen, moan all you want about the world, and there's a lot to moan about, but unless you lot get involved, believe me, it's going to get worse. And I do think that people have got more agency than they realise. And I cite in the book, loads of people who, some people will have heard of, like Greta Thunberg, or, you know, the policymakers who made change, but loads of people who I know who have made real change by deciding to do that, to make real change.
And are you optimistic about British politics in the coming time? I don't just mean the prospect of a Labour victory, but I mean let's imagine there's a Labour victory. The Starmer government will inherit some very significant problems, won't they? I mean, really big ones, domestic problems as well as foreign problems. It's not going to be an easy time to govern. The economic backdrop might still be very bad. Can you find optimism though in that, or does it do you look on that with some trepidation?
I do look at them with trepidation because I think, I mean, you know, it made my blood boil the other day watching Sunak with his, what was his slogan? Long-term solutions in a blah, blah, when he's got no intention of having a long-term plan for anything. And then but what I worry about is I remember Tony, back in 1997, there was a reason we were utterly obsessed by getting at least 2 terms. I don't think you can make that much change in 1 term. You can make change on the surface, but if you really want to cement change, and even with 3 terms, we didn't cement all the change we wanted to. Otherwise, frankly, we wouldn't be outside the European Union, and the health service wouldn't be on its knees in the way that it is, and all sorts of things wouldn't be happening. But so I am optimistic. But what I'd say is, I think a change of government is not the only change that we need. And I really hope that Labour, and I get why they don't want to put this centre stage, but I really hope that Labour actually make a big part of their platform. We've got to change the way that politics is. We've got to change the way that it's done. I really think, I was always a bit of a control freak, as you know, but I think there's got to be more devolution, not less. And I think it's got to be real. I think we've got to be getting much more out to the cities and the nations and the regions. And I think there's all sorts of other changes I'd like to make. I'd like to see us lower the voting age. I'd like to see us bring in compulsory voting, proper political education in schools, including in primary schools, and just rebuild our political culture because it's lost. We don't have a political culture in this country. We have a media that talks crap all day, and we have politicians who imbibe it and then feed it back. And we've got to get a vibrant political culture. Otherwise, I really do. And if Trump comes back, all bets are off. All bets are off. Democracy, really under threat.
Well, let's talk about that, because I do want to talk about the states. I mean, next year might be a big election year. It might be elections in this country, election in the States, it might be election in India as well, a very, very meaningful election. But
I can tell you the winner of that now.
Oh yeah, the consequences of it are rather worrying. The winner of it is fairly clear. But in the States, it's an open question, isn't it? I mean, firstly, do you think Trump will be the candidate? And then do you think he'll beat Biden?
I mean, I don't bet. I've never put a bet on in my life, but I do look at the odds a lot. And Trump is currently 2-1 favourite on the betting markets. I like to think not. But I wouldn't rule it out. And You know, I really like Joe Biden, and I think he's actually on policy and delivery. I think he's doing a really, really good job. But it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult. And I think people need to wake up to how difficult it's going to be. And back to the point about agency. You see, there's three statements in the book that I try to pick apart. And this is what I say when I go into schools all the time. These three things, and I bet you there'll be people here who say these things, even though you might not be aware of the consequences of saying and thinking them. I'll tell you what they are. First is, no point getting involved because they're all the same. Ridiculous, but people say that all the time. No point getting involved, they're all the same anyway. No point getting involved because nothing changes anyway. I mean, we're probably living through a period of greater change than there's ever been. And the third thing people say is no point getting involved because one person can't make a difference on their own. They're all nonsense. And if you can actually understand, it really matters who's in power, really matters. You look at what's happening in the European Union at the moment, right? We're out of the European Union, sadly. But when you have elections in places like Portugal and Slovakia and Bulgaria as members of the European Union, that has an effect on us. And we have to think about that and understand that it matters. So I just think making people wake up, because what the populists have done is they've made people who aren't sort of, call it progressives, call it what you want, what I call decent people who kind of care about the future of the world, they've made people feel it's hopeless. And they've turned people off getting involved and getting engaged, and we've got to reverse that. Otherwise, I think we're going to hell in a handcart.
Yeah, because Trump is, obviously there's the upshot of what he does, there's the consequences of the policies he follows, which are bad enough. But he's constantly corroding the process, isn't
Totally.
he? He's constantly undermining the idea that this is a process with any integrity.
So did Johnson. You know, I mean, we're interviewing, Rory Stewart and I are interviewing Theresa May this week, and I've just read her book, Abuse of Power and what have you. And, look, she's a far more decent person than Boris Johnson's ever going to be. But what is it about our politics that there's a guy who leads the campaign to win a referendum, one of the most significant electoral events in our history, and there's not a single person on the planet who doesn't now understand and accept that he lied to do it, right? Now, I can't get beyond that. And yet Theresa May made him Foreign Secretary, as a result of which he had then a perfect position to undermine her and eventually get her out and take over and become, I don't know, shall we have a vote, whether it's him or Truss, the worst Prime Minister in British history, but it's a battle between them.
Isn't there a gap opening up here between you now, you're a podcaster and commentator, etc., and you're free to say what you like, and then the other Alistair, which was the political strategist. As a political strategist, don't you understand that Theresa May might think, well, I don't like him, but obviously I'm better off having him close?
No, I do. No, but the point I'm making, though, is about accountability. I don't actually think there's been any accountability. People can say, oh, well, Johnson's lost his job. He lost his job, finally, because the Tories decided he wasn't a winner. He didn't lose his job. And the final straw was the thing about putting that groper back in the government. Nothing to do with it. It was nothing to do with the COVID thing. It was nothing to do with the lies about Brexit. It's nothing to do with the COVID corruption and all that stuff. So,
it's partly to do with not following the COVID rules, wasn't it? The combined effect of not being seen to follow.
Yeah, but if you go through all the other stuff, the lying to the Queen, the proroguing of Parliament, the lies in
You want his head on a stick, don't you? I mean, let's be honest.
Do you know what? I do often think about... No, I'm being serious. No, I think about... Because I go swimming at the Lido, right, most mornings, right? And Johnson's brother goes there, Joe Johnson.
Yeah.
And, part of me thinks...
This could go somewhere really dark.
No, it won't. No, part of me feels sorry for Johnson, because I've noticed he's started to do front crawl, because when he's doing breaststroke, it looks like Boris Johnson is swimming. He's got the same age, his blonde hair. And I'm often thinking, if that was Boris Johnson, what would I do? Because, I just feel he's not been properly held to account. He hasn't. And he has to be.
What? I mean, quite apart from stealing his clothes at Lido or something. Making him wander naked through Southend Green.
No.
But how politically would you think he should be held to account? What could happen that would then be a satisfactory resolution? Do you think?
Well, I can't see that there's anything within our system The other day, very small example, which 10, 15 years ago would have been seen as a big example, when that committee ruled that he broke the rules on post-ministerial appointments by signing up to a very lucrative Daily Mail column without going through that committee he meant to go through, right? Punishment, 0. Literally nothing. We still have a system where prime ministers are the only judge of ethics. Ridiculous. And by the way, ridiculous in our era as well. I'm not just making a point about them. So I don't know, but I don't believe in the death penalty. But and I think the prisons are overcrowded. But I think put it this way, I think there's quite a lot of people in prison at the moment who've done far less damage to this country than he's done. I really do think that.
Let's talk a bit about the thing he's most associated with. Let's talk about Brexit. But
not again.
Yeah. I want to look forward. Because the Labour Party have gone quiet on Brexit, and you've got to understand why. That's a political strategy that I have some sympathy with. But you get into government and you will inherit a country which all its problems then start to surface. And what do you think Labour can and should do in our relationship with the European Union?
Well, they have to. Look, let's just, first things first. The deal that was agreed to is a terrible deal. Okay, that's the first thing. Helpfully, inbuilt within it there has to be a regular discussion of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. And I do think that Keir's doing the right thing in sitting down and talking to Macron, sitting down and talking to some of the other European leaders. And I think that has to become the basis of the first steps of changing the relationship so that it's just less corrosive, less toxic, less difficult, practically difficult than it is now. But the second thing I think has to be done, and this is I can see why they don't do it, but I think both they and actually the Liberal Democrats, who parade themselves as the most pro-European party, they've gone completely quiet on it. But actually, systematically, day by day, calling out the damage that it's doing to business, to our relations, to our standing in the world. And I think eventually that will allow them to move to a position where, when, as I say, the Tories saying, this is a secret plot to get us back in the European Union, the body of opinion is going to start thinking, bloody hope so. So that you move you don't, I get why he's not leading with his chin. I totally understand that. He doesn't want to go to the next election with everybody thinking it's about Brexit. People have had enough, right? He wants to go into the next election thinking, right, the Tories are finished, they're terrible for the country, and we've got to have change, and here's the change I'm going to bring. I totally get that. But if he's serious, and as you say, inheriting a very, very non-benign economic playing field, if he's serious about getting to, to real growth, then we have to undo and repair the incredible damage that's been done by cutting ourselves out of the biggest market in the world. It's just so blindingly obvious. And I think in government, you know this because you've worked with us in opposition and in government. In government, you can do that much easier. You've got the power to make more change, and that's what I hope they do.
Is there any prospect of you being involved in that after back in government? Is there any chance of you giving up all this fame and celebrity and all this adoring audiences that come to see you? You go back and do the hard grind in politics again? Or are you done?
Well, I still do get involved. I still do stuff, and there are Labour politicians I work with, there are politicians abroad that I work with. I think the one thing I've learned about myself is I don't think I ever want a full-time job again. I don't think I do. And the other thing about campaigns and stuff, I still get a bit, I don't know, I've had this weird feeling whenever they do ask me to help them with stuff, because I kind of desperately want them to find 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds who can do better for today's age what we did for a very different age.
Do you feel you're exercising a kind of power now? I mean, you sell out the Palladium and you kind of basically turned into Ken Dodd with Laura Stewart. But you've got a massive, massive audience. You're reaching an enormous audience. And do you feel that's a kind of power?
I don't know. It's funny this. Did you watch the Tyson Fury series? Did people watch the Tyson Fury series? Worth watching. So Tyson Fury, who's obviously known massive wealth, massive fame, real success, like me, has kind of, mental health stuff going on a lot of the time. And he did this trip in the series. He went to the Isle of Man. And he did an event with all his fans who came along, and they loved him, and they were screaming his name, what have you. And he came off the stage at the end, and he was absolutely buzzing. And I was watching it with Fiona, and I said, "That's really weird." That I said, I never get that feeling. And so I think the short answer is no, I don't feel it.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.